it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Tales from the Iron Triangle, the Forward Observer. Operation Junction City, March 1967. Republic of South Vietnam. To say that Private First Class Sam Salty Menendez was a cocky little sack of shit would have been a complete understatement. The little Filipino-American soldier was the best FO in the entire 1st Infantry Division's artillery battalion, and he wasn't afraid to flaunt that fact to anyone and everyone who cared to listen, and even to those who did not. You may have the power of 1805mm howitzers at your command. He would often brag in the mess hall back at the 1st Infantry Division's base camp at Dion. But they're useless without good FO out there with the grunts. You artillery boys sitting safe and sound back in the rear are literally useless unless an FO is out in the bush telling you where to point your gun tubes. Salty had a big mouth, even though Salty Menendez wasn't a particularly big kid. In fact, he was a little on the scrawny side. But he was always a bundle of energy and could hump twice his weight in gear through the bush with the best of them. At his advanced individual training school at Fort Sill, where he learned to be a forward observer, it was clear that Salty had certain skills and talents which set him apart from the rest of his classmates. So, although Salty looked like the classic example of a bookworm nerd, which included the big black-rimmed army-issue glasses he wore, his overbearing self-confidence and his ability to walk the walk and talk the talk, along with his physically bigger and more muscular comrades, endeared him to his classmates to the point of being annoying. As a forward observer, it was Salty's job to go out with the regular infantry Joes and seek out the enemy. Sometimes in Vietnam you found the enemy, but 11 times out of 10 the enemy found you first. In either case, when it occurred, you needed artillery and you needed it accurate and fast. It was the job of the forward observer to relay that critical information, the who, what, where, when, why, and how much high explosives to use, back to the rear so that the artillery boys could start sending 105mm high explosive rounds in your direction. Well, on the surface, an FO's job was pretty simple. First, you find the bad guys, or just wait for them to eventually find you. Then you call back to the artillery boys waiting faithfully next to their howitzers to blow shit up. The FO calls in one adjusting round and watches where it lands in relation to the enemy. The FO then calls in another adjusting round, hoping to make it land on the opposite side of where the first round landed. If the FO is good, the enemy position would be located somewhere between where the first 2 rounds had landed. And after that, the FO calls in adjustments, slowly walking the high explosive rounds closer and closer towards the enemy until the rounds land on target. Once the adjusting rounds impact directly on top of the enemy positions, the FO calls fire for effect, at which time multiple high explosive rounds are dropped on the enemy's head until they're pulverized into bloody ex-enemies. Well, naturally the enemy isn't just going to sit there and let those nasty round-eyed Americans liberate them to death. They'll constantly be moving to find cover and, hopefully, bring their own fire on the pesky American FO. So the FO will be constantly adjusting rounds until the artillery boys get on target. To do this accurately and swiftly, the FO needs to be spot on in reading a map and pinpointing grid coordinates. And the FO needs to be good at judging distance, estimating range, and accurately reading compass directions. Also, being good at trigonometry was a definite plus. And that little shit, Salty Menendez, had all of these things in spades, along with a cocky ego that was far too big for an entire airborne division. During training back at Fort Sill, Private Menendez usually only needed to call 1 or 2 adjustment rounds on a stationary target before calling fire for effect. In the more difficult mission of hitting a moving target, Salty usually needed to expend just 4 adjusting rounds before calling for fire for effect. Then, in December 1966, Private Sam Salty Menendez graduated at the top of his forward observer class at Fort Sill and was promoted to Private First Class. Shortly after the Christmas holiday, Salty and most of his classmates found themselves on a transport plane headed towards the war in Vietnam. Salty and 3 of his FO classmates from Fort Sill, Hayden, Frenchy, and McDermott, found themselves at the massive army camp base at Dion, and assigned to the famous U.S. Army 1st Infantry Division. The division was known as the Big Red One due to the big, stylized number 1, colored red, emblazoned on the unit patch, which was shaped like a shield. The 4 newbie FOs had exactly 3 weeks to acclimatize to the humid, sticky jungle weather and the smell of mold and stale air. The Big Red One was busy getting ready to leave Dian to participate in Operation Junction City, the military's largest operation in Vietnam to date, aimed at destroying the Viet Cong in a large area of South Vietnam in what was known as the Iron Triangle. The 4 FOs had been attached to the Forward Observer Company of the division's artillery battalion. The artillery battalion was short of qualified FOs, as novice forward observers had a nasty habit of returning from extended field operations as the creamy filling of a green rubber body bag. Hayden, Frenchy and McDermott were naturally apprehensive, having to prepare to go out and face an enemy which had fought the mighty US military to a standstill for so many years. They only had 2 or 3 occasions to practice calling for artillery fire around the base camp before it was time to step off and invade the enemy-held territory, nicknamed Indian Country by the infantry soldiers who'd ventured into the Iron Triangle and lived to tell about it. For his part, Salty seemed genuinely looking forward to going into the Iron Triangle. "Oh, this is the Big Red One, guys," he said to his buddy as they were cleaning their M16s in their squad tent and making final preparations to move out of the base. "These guys know what they're doing. Besides, you get me out there, I'll get a few years off this war." "This isn't Fort Sill, Salty," said Frenchy, Salty's best friend since basic training. "These things are different when they're shooting back at you." Said Salty. "That's what the infantry Joes are for. They do all the return firing while we call in the artillery and put steel on targets." "Geez, Salty," said Hayden, taking a break from packing to shovel a spoonful of sea-ration wieners and beans into his mouth. "If they could turn your ego into a bomb, this war will be over tomorrow." "I can't help being the best, baby," replied Salty, clicking the bolt and upper receiver of his M16 back and forth, ensuring that it was cleaned and oiled and would work properly. "The VC are nothing but little starving yellow bastards, little rice-eating cowards and bullies. I'm going to enjoy force-feeding the Viet Cong a few hundred rounds of high explosives." McDermott rolled his eyes. "Man, Salty, you're Asian, you're Filipino, right?" "Semantics." Salty waved his hand dismissively. "Besides, I hate rice." The next morning, 8 olive-drab US Army UH-1 Huey utility helicopters transported the company out to Dian on a 45-minute trip east to the battalion's forward operating base just west of the Iron Triangle. The mess hall had served a particularly hearty breakfast meal which Hayden managed to barf out of the Huey's open side door, much to the consternation of the helicopter's door gunner, who now had ham and egg vomit all over his jungle boots. The formation circled over one of the 1st Infantry Division's forward operating bases that was located in the middle of a swallow valley of tall sawgrass and reeds, with densely tree-covered foothills and mountains bracketing the base on the north, south, and west, while a stream ran across the eastern perimeter. Salty leaned over and looked down at the base as the helicopters made their final approach to the LZ, the landing zone. He could see that the base was still under construction, as shirtless soldiers were toiling away, stringing up razor wire around the perimeter, filling sandbags for bunkers and tents, and digging out machine gun and fighting positions. Towards the center of the base, Salty saw 2 pits dug out of the red clay earth, each holding 2 81mm mortars. About 200 meters east of the mortars, a large firing position was dug out which held a battery of 4 of the Army's new M102 105mm howitzers. It was barely after 9 o'clock in the morning, and although this was the temperate dry season in Vietnam, it was already showing signs of being a muggy and humid day. The helicopters had no sooner touched down to the flat LZ than a big senior NCO appeared at the open cargo door, yelling and screaming at the young 9 GIs to get their gear and their asses out of the chopper now. "Jesus H. Christ, you sacks of shit," yelled the shaven-headed senior NCO wearing a pair of sunglasses, a cigar clenched between his teeth. "This isn't a fucking picnic, ladies. Mr. Victor isn't waiting here to serve you finger sandwiches and lemonade. This is fucking Indian country, and if you don't want to be a notch in some VC sniper's rifle, you will unass this chopper now." What the hell kind of slow-ass losers are they contaminating my beloved United States Army with these days? The senior NCO, who stood at least 6 feet 3 inches, glared at the 9 FNGs, who'd been packed in the Huey helicopter, barely hiding his disgust as the brand new GIs with their clean, unfaded olive uniforms seemed to be taking their own sweet time getting out, even though they were clumsily stumbling and bumbling to jump out as quickly as possible. Even Salty scrambled to grab his pack and his rifle as he hurried to jump out of the helicopter's sliding door, not wanting to piss off the angry NCO more than he already had. "Get off my damned LZ and get into that bunker over there before the VC begins lobbing rounds at us," he yelled at the new arrivals. Then, turning, he yelled over his shoulder to 4 soldiers waiting at the edge of the LZ. "What the hell are you idiots waiting for? Grab those bags of dunnage and trash and throw it in the back of the chopper. You're in the middle of fucking Vietnam. You're not at home where mommy's gonna make your bed for you and throw out your damn trash." Salty peered out of the wooden frame which formed the entrance into the sandbag and aluminum roof bunker, noting that the big sergeant was still yelling at the 4 soldiers on garbage detail, even after they'd tossed the trash into the helicopter and the helicopter was lifting off. "Get your asses back to your work details," he continued, yelling at the unfortunate garbage detail. "I want that new machine gunner bunk dug out by noon, and I want 100 meters of ground cleared from in front of the 1st and 2nd squad's fighting positions. Now, get the hell out of my face." From behind Salty, Private Hayden gulped as they all watched the big, bald-headed sergeant stomp towards the bunker, massive sun-tanned muscles bulging out from rolled-up uniform sleeves, his M16 looking like a matchstick in his meaty hands. He had the rank of Sergeant First Class E7 and wore 2 1st Infantry Division patches, one sewn on each sleeve, meaning that he had survived more than one combat tour in Vietnam with the 1st Infantry Division. "Gee, that guy makes our drill sergeants look like a bunch of lady parts," whispered McDermott. "I bet John Wayne shines his boots." "Wonder if he's going to be our platoon sergeant," said one of the other green UGIs. "Well, I hope not," thought Salty, as the big sergeant pushed through the entrance and stalked into the bunker. Without stopping for introductions, the big sergeant yelled, "Which ones are you numbnuts at 11 Bravos?" He scanned the faces of the new soldiers, who were looking dumbly up at him. Come on, I got a water fight and I don't have time to wait on—" "I'm 11 Bravo," said a skinny black kid standing in the back of the bunker and raising his hand. "Yeah, so are we," said a white kid, nodding to a shorter Hispanic kid standing next to him. "We're 11 Bravo. We graduated infantry school from Fort Benning together." "Jeez, they graduated you younger and younger, don't they?" said the sergeant, shifting the cigar in his mouth. "Any of you get laid before you left the States?" "No matter," he grunted. "You killers are getting ready to head into the Valley of Death where, if you ain't careful, you will be well and truly fucked. I'm Sergeant First Class Pretty because—" He removed the cigar from his mouth and held out his arms. "Well, just look at me. I'll be your platoon sergeant, and I'll be the prettiest thing you'll ever see in Vietnam, so get used to it. Welcome to Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 16th Infantry Regiment. Boys, you're in the same unit that took the Normandy beaches from the damn Nazis in World War II, and we're gonna take this damned Iron Triangle from the damn commies. Just do as you're told. Don't do anything stupid. Follow my lead and you'll walk out of the Iron Triangle in one piece. Trust me, boys. This ain't Sergeant Pretty's first rodeo." He put the cigar back in his mouth, smiling in a cocky manner which surprisingly calmed the new soldiers. "Who all here is a mortar chucker? Who here is 11 Charlie?" This time 2 soldiers quickly raised their hands. "We're 11 Charlie, Mortar Man Sergeant," said a muscular young black soldier. Sergeant Pretty smiled. "Good. Sergeant Brickhouse is going to love seeing you guys. The mortar section's down 3 guys. It seems they got the running trots from drinking the water from that stream you saw at the Easter here. That's explosive diarrhea, ladies. It'll put you down faster than an AK-47 round. Remember, boys, don't drink no water around here until you sanitize it first. They got shit in the water that'll make your pecker fall off if you ain't careful." Sergeant Pretty looked at the last 4 newcomers of the group, and Salty, Hayden, Frenchy, and McDermott stared at the sergeant in apprehension. "Oh," said Sergeant Pretty, "who the hell are you little shits? And what good are you to my beloved firebase?" "We're 13 Fox," said Salty. "Artillery forward observers." "I see," said Sergeant Pretty dubiously, inhaling his cigar and blowing a puff of smoke which seemed to engulf the bunker. "You Redlegs any good?" interrogated Sergeant Pretty, calling the FOs by their traditional army nickname of Redleg. "We aren't," said Salty. "We like to think we are." Just then, 2 mortar rounds exploded in the middle of the helicopter landing zone, throwing black smoke and red clay into the air. Fortunately, the helicopters had long since departed, although there was still a great deal of consternation and yelling amongst the soldiers who were at the LZ perimeter, who were busy digging fighting positions and emplacing razor wire. "Well, hope you're better than that VC forward observer," said Sergeant Pretty, pointing a thumb out into the jungle. "If he were any good, you'd all be dead by now, but I'm sure he's just throwing out the challenge to you boys. Anyway, for your sakes, I hope you're better than the last new guy FO we lost," said the sergeant, lighting his cigar again. What happened to him, Sergeant?" gulped Frenchy. "His name was Private, I forget his name, an FNG, just like you guys. He'd been out on patrol in the bush a few times with some other platoons, but nothing happened. Then one day he was attached to my platoon during one of our first patrols into the Iron Triangle. We got into a scrap with Mr. Victor. They opened up on us from a tree line 200 meters away with small arms and machine gun fire. Lieutenant Hastings pulled us back, and we had a Mexican standoff with the VC. Usually the lieutenant would be the one calling in direct fire, but since we had an FO, the lieutenant showed Private, I forget his name, where he wanted the rounds placed. The FO called in one adjustment 81mm round. It landed almost directly on top of his head. Well, there wasn't much left of my lieutenant or that dumb son of a bitch FO to put in a damn sandwich bag. Sergeant Pretty took out his cigar and pointed it threateningly at the 4 forward observers. I don't care how shit-hard you were in training. I don't care if you can drop a 155mm round into a damn bucket at 20 miles. That was just training. This is the real world with real consequences. If you get so screwed in the head by rifle fire impacting all around you that your dumbass accidentally calls artillery on your own head, you're no good to me. If any of you Redlegs are attached to one of my patrols, you better not fuck up. I will kill you myself. Is that clear, Redlegs?
Yes, Sergeant,
yelped all 4 of the forward observers in unison. Good, smiled Sergeant Pretty. Now that we got that straight, get the hell out of my bunker. The artillery command post is that big tent you saw to the north of the artillery battery as you were flying in. Infantry and mortars, you follow me. UFOs know where your command post is located. Now, get the hell out of my bunker. Upon arriving at the artillery command post, the 4 new forward observers met the artillery unit's first sergeant who, in turn, introduced them to their new FO platoon sergeant. The FO platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Blanchard, was nothing like Big Sergeant First Class Pretty. He was thinner, with bushy hair, and was reserved to the point of being introverted. The FO platoon sergeant showed them the tent where they could stow their gear, then showed them where the mess tent was, where they could grab chow. He explained that the FO section was stretched pretty thin, and that the other FOs were out on missions. Staff Sergeant Blanchard was pleasant enough, but he was nowhere near as charismatic or inspired as much confidence as Sergeant Pretty, and, strangely, Salty and the rest of the new FOs were disappointed. The 4 found empty cots in the tent. There were 12 cots in total, arranged in 2 rows inside the tent, and the 4 sat in silence, trying to take in the sights, sounds, and smells of their new home for the next few weeks. The window flaps of the tent were rolled up, allowing the humid air to circulate the musty air around. A pile of the red clay sand sat next to the tent, along with 2 pallets of sandbags and 2 shovels. The previous FOs had already begun lining the tent with a wall of sandbags, but the project was far from completion. Sergeant Blanchard instructed them to spend the rest of the day filling sandbags and lining their tent after they secured their gear, 3 soldiers filling sandbags while 1 soldier stood guard, just in case a VC decided to take pot shots at them. Soon, all 4 of them had removed their sweat-soaked t-shirts and uniform tops, their skin itching with the grit of the dirt and clay as they labored away filling sandbags. Occasionally, a Huey helicopter or the larger Chinook helicopter would land at the LZ, unloading replacements or supplies and equipment, and the rotor downdraft would provide a brief and pleasant-feeling breeze. On one occasion, a helicopter with a red cross on the side landed, and 6 medics emerged from the medical tank carrying 3 stretchers between them. There were 3 green rubber body bags on them. "Oh, shit," said McDermott, throwing a filled sandbag down next to their tent. "Is that what I think it is?" They stopped their labor, watching silently as the 3 dead American soldiers were placed into the med-evac helicopter for their final trip home. All of a sudden, a voice yelled, "Fire mission!" coming from the artillery battery, which was positioned 100 meters to the west of where the FO living tent was located. Artillery red-leg soldiers ran from their bunkers to man the guns, turning cranks to elevate and rotate the gun tubes to the proper elevation and azimuth. 4 other red-legs stood by, 3 of them the new guys who'd arrived with the FOs earlier, a 34-pound high-explosive round cradled in their arms. Somewhere out in the jungle, an American forward observer was calling for artillery against the enemy. Once the howitzer gun tubes were pointed in the right direction, the loaders rammed high-explosive rounds into the breech, which slammed shut with a loud, metallic thunk. "Fire!" came the order from the gun chiefs, and the entire base rocked with the sound of outgoing artillery fire. "Fire! Fire! Fire!" The order was given several times, and each time a high-explosive round boomed out of the tubes and flew over, out into the jungle. Seconds later, the crum, crum, crum sound of explosive rounds crashed in the distance. It was frighteningly close, no more than 2 miles. "Oh, man," said Frenchie. "That's close. Are the VC that close?" "Damn it," yelled Salty, tossing his entrenching tool into the pile of dirt. "What the hell are we doing here? We need to be out there. I need to be out there. We ain't killing nobody just sitting here filling damn sandbags." 2 more fire missions were called before a dinner chow of overlooked spaghetti noodles and watery pasta were served, complete with 2 soggy dinner rolls and copious amounts of hot sauce. None of the other FOs returned that night, as they'd be out overnight with the platoons they were attached to. The new FO spent their first night in the field rotating on 2-hour guard shifts out on the perimeter in a bunker which housed an M60 machine gun that stared out into the pitch-black jungle 300 meters away. Occasionally, one of the mortars would send up a flare round, and for a few minutes the entire base and jungle tree line would be bathed in an eerie reddish-pink glow. The night passed uneventfully, and the 4 stumbled into their tent after a breakfast meal of toast, powdered eggs, fatty sausage, watered-down orange juice, and bananas. While they were at chow, one of the veteran FOs who'd been out the day before returned along with the infantry platoon he was supporting. He was a black soldier whose sweat-soaked and muddy uniform was sun-faded 2 shades from what his original olive drab color used to be, and whose helmet camouflage cover was frayed and ripped. Dried mud and dirt covered his M16, and he smelled of jungle and sweat. The young black soldier looked up with barely disguised resentment at the new FOs as they entered the tent. "Oh, hey," said Frenchie, always the most cordial of the 4. "You must be one of the team. "Save it," snapped the exhausted black soldier, and Frenchie jumped back. "You can tell me your goddamn names in a couple of weeks, if you last that long. We've been going through you FNGs like diarrhea, and it's tiring just trying to keep up with your names." "I'm sorry, man," said Frenchie. "I didn't." The black soldier just waved his hands dismissively. He stood up from his cot, grabbed his rifle, and put his helmet back on. "Don't worry about it, man. We're cool." Then, in a less pissed-off tone, he said, "What are they serving for breakfast? Wait, let me guess. Toast, powdered eggs, fatty sausage, and watered-down orange juice." "Oh, and bananas," piped in Hayden. The black soldier rolled his eyes. "And bananas." As he made to leave the tent to go grab some breakfast, the soldier stopped in front of McDermott, who was also black. "Where you from, new blood?" Brooklyn, answered McDermott.
What part?
North End, near Flatbush, answered McDermott. You?
Brooklyn, South End, Bell Parkway, said the black soldier.
He exhaled.
My name's Johnson. You'll meet the others later on. Look, cats, you need to learn as much as you can while you're out here. I'm already sure you met Sergeant Blanchard. He's 30 days and a wake-up short. Got 1 month left in Vietnam, so all he's thinking about is getting his ass out of the bush and back to his home in Redneck, USA. Mind you, he did his time out in the bush, but he ain't looking to teach you guys anything. Look, cats, said Johnson. We started out 5 months ago with 16 FOs. Of the original 16 of us, only me and Cooper are left. The other 2 FOs, Masty and Diggerson, are the ones who are left of the replacements. Well, we'll teach you what we can, but you need to absorb it quick, like a sponge.
Thanks, brother, said McDermott, holding out his hand.
I know who you are, brother, said Johnson. Your name's on your damn uniform. Well, I'm just not going to learn your names until you prove your newbie asses aren't going to get blown away. We'll talk later, cats.
Johnson then pushed back the tent flap and trudged towards the mess tent.
Yeah, and I hope your ass makes a detour to the showers before you get back, said Salty.
Suddenly Salty clapped his hands and smiled.
Hey, you know what that means? With all 4 of the current FOs coming back from missions, that means they're going to need a little recovery time. That means we'll be the next ones to be called out. I cannot wait to unload some high explosive on some VCS.
McDermott shook his head, slumping back down in his cot.
You're hopeless, you know that, Salty. Completely hopeless.
Salty turned out to be correct in his assessment, as both Frenchy and McDermott were called to see Sergeant Blanchard and the artillery commander, Captain Greenbaum, at the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center. The next mission was going to be a classic hammer and anvil attack against the VC in the Iron Triangle, a heavily reinforced mechanized unit consisting of M113 tracked armored vehicles called APCs, Armored Personnel Carriers, each mounting 1 M2 heavy machine gun and 2 M60 general purpose machine guns, would be supporting the mission. This force would act as the anvil, stationing themselves in the shallow valley across from where the base camp is located 7 miles into the Iron Triangle. A second force, acting as the hammer, consisted of 2 infantry companies using helicopters to airlift deeper into the Iron Triangle. Once they land, the infantry would begin pushing towards the armored force of APCs, driving the VC in front of them. Frenchy would go with the anvil section, which would be riding out of their engagement area, atop the box-shaped armored personnel carriers. McDermott would be flying out with the hammer section, which would be dropping some 6 kilometers away from the anvil section. Both of the FOs would be attached to the command section of their respective combat elements. The mission was to last no more than 2 or 3 days, and Frenchy and McDermott were told to keep that in mind as they packed their gear, equipment, and rifle. Predictably, Salty was furious when he wasn't chosen to go on the mission, and he raged around the tent, bitterly complaining to Hayden. He stood outside their tent and watched with barely contained envy, feeling betrayed as his best friend Frenchy threw his gear atop one of the 10 armored vehicles which was festooned with machine guns and mechanized infantry soldiers as they roared out of the heavily guarded main gate of the base camp. Frenchy knew how bad I wanted to get out there. He could have said he was sick, thought Salty. Frenchy could have told them that I could take his place. Some friend you turn out to be, you asshole. 30 minutes later, the air around the base camp beat with a dozen Huey helicopters, which landed to pick up the first company of infantry soldiers who'd be the hammer in this attack. Again, Salty watched as McDermott threw his pack inside his designated chopper, and soon he and the rest of the soldiers were lifted into the sky on the beating rotor blades as 12 helicopters turned southwest into Indian country. Within minutes, a second wave of 12 helicopters landed to pick up the rest of the attacking force, which were waiting on the LZ for transport into the Iron Triangle. Soon all was relatively quiet on the base, save for the rapidly fading sound of Huey helicopters beating the air. Salty stood alone outside the tent, bitter and frustrated. Salty and Hayden hung around the TOC, eavesdropping on the radios to hear what was going on with the mission. They sat around trying to be as inconspicuous as possible, so as not to be called to any work details. The armoured vehicle Force Frenchie was attached to was 7 miles away travelling cross-country, and was about 2 miles from where they were going to set up the trap in the other valley. The helicopters had already dropped off the infantry company that McDermott was attached to on the opposite ridgeline. They were already pushing across the jungle towards the armoured vehicles. The second force of helicopters had reported receiving sporadic small arms and machine gun fire from the surrounding hills, but had also successfully dropped off their infantrymen, and they were pushing up the slopes of the ridge. Though the enemy was proving to be in the area, there were no solid contacts, the VC seemingly contented just to take pot shots at the Americans and gauging their strength. Then, a little bit after noontime, the radios in the TOC lit up with reports of the AH-1 Cobra gunships which were circling protectively overhead or coming under heavy fire from hidden VC machine guns. These AH-1 Cobra gunships, which were fitted with multiple machine guns, rocket launchers and grenade launchers, immediately dived on their attackers. However, as the gunships pulled away, the armoured force, which was acting as the anvil, immediately came under fire from multiple VC snipers and RPGs, coming from the jungle 300 meters to their front and left side. With their gunship cover gone for the moment, the commander at the scene called for indirect fire support. Now, just outside the TOC's main entrance, Salty could hear Frenchie's voice over the fire direction control radio. Frenchie was in the command vehicle with the element commander and calling for adjusting fire rounds against the offending tree line which hid the VC. Immediately, the redlegs manning the howitzers at the base camp sprang into action, pointing their gun tubes into the sky, and within minutes they were firing high explosive rounds into the grid coordinates that Frenchie had given them. Salty was beside himself with rage and jealousy as he stood outside of the TOC. He wanted to be the first one out of the group to call a fire mission. He wanted to be the first one to pound the VC with high explosives. But instead, it was that traitor friend of his who was out there getting all the glory. How could Frenchie be so selfish? It wasn't fair. Salty stormed off towards his tent, his anger and jealousy growing with every shot that the howitzers fired. As Salty and Hayden walked back to the tent, they saw a tired-looking soldier lounging on the sandbags in front of the entrance, his boots muddy and his long brown hair a mess. He was sipping on a warm can of Coke and looked at Salty and Hayden with disdain. "Is that you raising a fuss?" said the soldier. The name on his faded green uniform read Cooper. "The other members of the team are in their bracks asleep after being out in the bush for 4 days, and you're out here whining like a baby." "Sorry," said Salty, unapologetically, as he made to enter the tent. "Hang on, newbie," said Cooper, extending his leg and blocking the entrance with his boot. Salty stopped. "Yeah, you too," said Cooper, pointing with his Coke can at Hayden. "Maybe you didn't hear what I just said. Them boys in there have been out in the bush for days on end, slogging through the jungle looking for Mr. Victor. They earn the right to sleep during the day." Cooper looked at Salty. "You telling me that you expect us just to come out here and do your jobs for you there, Private Meningitis?" "No," said Salty. "And it's Private First Class Menendez." Whatever, newbie," said Cooper, sitting back. "Till you prove your worth, you're just Private I forget his name. Either way, you ain't getting that 10 until tonight. Besides, you got work to do." "What do we need to do?" asked Hayden, looking to smooth the situation between Salty and Cooper. Cooper finished his Coke and tossed it into an empty 55-gallon drum, which they were using as a trash can. "First off, you newbies can take up all that trash in our area and get it ready for pickup tomorrow morning," said Cooper. "Then after that..." Cooper pointed his thumb over his shoulder to the pile of red sand and clay resting next to the stack of sandbags. "Well, they ain't gonna fill themselves. Stack 'em wide and stack 'em tall." Salty rolled his eyes, giving out an exasperated huff as he stomped towards the shovels. Hayden gave Cooper an apologetic look. "Let me guess, newbie," said Cooper, stopping Hayden. "He was your goddamn distinguished honor graduate at 13 Fox School." Hayden nodded. "Well, you better watch your buddy, newbie," said Cooper. "His ass still thinks he's back on the block. One thing you'll learn is that out here,
The VC doesn't give a rat's ass about our artillery.
The hammer and anvil mission ended late the next day, and an exhausted Frenchie and McDermott returned to the tent in time for dinner chow. Aside from calling in artillery fire on the enemy early on in the operation yesterday, Frenchie also called in artillery during the night, hitting predetermined plots on the map to hopefully catch the enemy while they were moving under cover of darkness. Likewise, when the hammer element took defensive positions at the hilltop that night, McDermott had called for illumination rounds to keep the enemy off balance. Unfortunately, when the infantry company eventually linked up with their armoured support, there had been no significant engagements with the enemy except for occasional sniper fire and fleeting glimpses of black-clad Vietnamese carrying AK-47s and RPGs scrambling into the jungle and disappearing. Searches of where the friendly artillery had struck proved fruitless, as no sign of enemy casualties could be found. No blood, no bandages, no body parts. Nothing but holes in the jungle and wasted American tax dollars. Still, the enemy had been there, as McDermott's infantry element had stumbled upon some recently abandoned VC campsites where the Americans had captured several bags of rice, 3 bicycles, and 2 enemy RPGs. There was water still boiling in tin pots, meaning that the VC had escaped, melting into the jungle just moments before the Americans had arrived. This was the only spoils which the Americans could claim for the entire mission. In return, 4 Americans had been injured, 2 who had been tripped by cleverly hidden VC booby traps, and 2 who had been wounded by snipers.
They were all around us, said McDermott in a hushed tone in the mess hall. Yeah, we couldn't see them, even with the Ilum rounds overhead. But we could feel them around us. I could hear them. Shit, I could even smell them.
McDermott shuddered.
Welcome to the Iron Triangle, brother, said Johnson.
That mission was a cakewalk. Don't worry, though.
330 more days and you'll be out of Vietnam.
Salty and Hayden sat in rapt attention as Frenchie relayed the account of how he had called artillery fire from the back of the APC command track on suspected sniper positions, but how the search ultimately came up empty. The 4 veteran FOs, Cooper, Johnson, Massey, and Dickerson, just ignored him as if they'd heard the same thing hundreds of times. They talked amongst themselves, mostly about how many days they were short before they could go home. Meaning, Salty sat fuming until Sergeant Blanchard entered the mess tent.
Hey guys,
said Sergeant Blanchard to his veteran FOs. How'd it go?
Same old,
said Cooper, biting down on an apple.
How you doing?
Said Johnson. 23 days and a wake-up and I'm out of here, said Sergeant Blanchard. But who's counting, right? Blanchard put a hand on Cooper's shoulder.
Yeah, Specialist Cooper. When I leave, you'll be in charge until they bring in a replacement.
Hell, they have to promote you to sergeant.
Can't wait, said Cooper,
greeting the news with all the enthusiasm of a rainstorm at a picnic.
Hey, Blanche, he said. Who do we have up for the next mission?
Well, that's what I came in here for, answered Blanchard.
Hayden and Menendez.
I need to see you 2 at the talk immediately after chow.
Hey, Sarge, said Johnson.
Them cats just got here. They need time to... No better teacher than experience, right? Interrupted Blanchard. 15 minutes, be at the talk. Hayden went pale, but inside Salty Menendez was screaming with excitement and anticipation.
Now we're gonna get the show on the road,
proclaimed Salty happily. He was back in his tent and packing his gear after the meeting at the top. The next morning's mission into Indian country was going to be similar to the last Hammer and Anvil maneuver, only with 2 infantry companies stealthily sneaking into position to create the anvil while the louder, armoured personnel carriers being the hammer. It was hoped that the noisier and more imposing armoured vehicles would be more intimidating, which would drive the VC into the waiting ambush of the American infantrymen. Both Salty and Hayden would be attached to one of the infantry companies that would be acting as the anvil, waiting to call in artillery when the VC finally showed their faces. This mission was only going to last 1 day, also in the hopes that the lightning-fast charge of the APCs would catch the VC off guard and not allow them time to escape.
No offense, boys,
continued Salty as he stuffed an extra poncho and 2 pairs of socks into his rucksack, but this little Filipino headhunter is going to show you what a real forward observer can do.
"Are you for real?" yelled Johnson. Then turning to Hayden, he yelled, "Is this arrogant little shit for real?"
He's been like that since Fort Sill,
shrugged Hayden as he packed his gear.
"Salty, bro," said McDermott. "This ain't like training. Oh, there's stuff out there that training at Fort Sill can't prepare you for what you're gonna face."
"Listen to your buddy, new guy," said Cooper. "He's just been on one mission and already he knows they don't teach you jack shit back at Fort Sill."
"Look," said Salty, "I appreciate what you've all gone through, really, I do. But you all are just a bunch of round eyes. You ain't like me." "Salty," said Frenchie, "listen to Cooper, he's right. You may be a god at Fort Sill, but out there, well, out there you're only as bulletproof as your own skin." "Don't lecture me, Frenchie," yelled Salty, finally letting his resentment for his friend come out. "Don't you tell me what it's like in the jungle. Look, I grew up in the Philippines. I grew up in the damn jungle. What you call scary, I call home. My father was a Filipino scout in World War II. He kept fighting the Japs long after you round eyes surrendered to the Japanese like a bunch of sissies. So you lady parts can sit around here and cry, oh, woe is me, all you want. I'm going out there to help win this war." It was almost 3 hours after the helicopters had dropped the infantry company off in a valley deep in the Iron Triangle early the next morning. As luck would have it, Salty and Hayden were attached to Sergeant First Class Pretty's platoon, and he was in rare form at 0500 hours when his company boarded the helicopters. He grabbed the two FOs before they boarded the helicopters, and with a piercing gaze said, "Don't either of you FOs fuck up. Do I make myself clear?" Salty smiled. "You point to them, I'll kill him," he yelled under the whirring of the chopper blades. It all happened so quickly, so fast that Salty didn't remember how he ended up lying on the ground next to Hayden's dead body. The drop-off into the LZ went smoothly. The infantry company was on a relatively flat plain of tall grass and steadily moving eastwards towards a strand of trees. Salty and Hayden were with the command element of the platoon, with Sergeant First Class Pretty, the platoon leader, and the platoon machine gun team. Hayden was humping the radio and Salty had the map. Since they both agreed that Salty was better at map reading and fixing coordinates, he would be the one to read the target grid coordinates and Hayden would relay the data back to Captain Greenbaum at the firebase. As the platoon entered the strand of trees, Salty said, "Hang on, Hayden," as he went to unbuckle his trousers while walking up to a thick palm tree. "The thought of calling in Artie on the VC is making me so excited I need to piss." So, as the platoon exited the tree line and continued walking across the plain of tall grass beyond, Hayden waited with Salty as he finished his business on the side of the tree. Meanwhile, Sergeant Pretty was yelling instructions to his soldiers as they steadily but carefully crossed the open space. "First squad, you're bunching up, spread out, 5 to 10 meters. "Moving," yelled the first squad in response. "Keep an eye out for wires and dug up dirt," yelled Sergeant Pretty. "The fucking VC are masters at hiding booby traps. Second squad, you need to keep an eye on the tree line up front. Be sure that you got range estimation for the damn thumper. Right now, we're at about 300 meters. When we get halfway across, we'll be 150. You got that, Maxie?" "Roger that, Sarge," yelled the grenadier. Then, noticing that his radio man was no longer with the lieutenant, Sergeant Pretty turned back to the tree line and angrily yelled, "Hey, you redlegs, what the hell are you doing? You gonna help him shake it when he's done? Get that damn radio up here with the lieutenant." Hayden gulped. "I'm moving, Sarge." As soon as Hayden emerged from the tree line, a loud crack echoed across the field. Hayden's head snapped back, bone and brain matter flying everywhere. The platoon went to ground as the tree line opposite the Americans opened up in a hail of AK-47 and machine gun rifle fire. Salty was still standing inside the tree line in a state of shock, looking at what was left of his dead friend's ruined head. "Maxie," yelled Sergeant Pretty, "get that damn thumper going." "Maxie's been hit," yelled one of the soldiers in his squad. Sergeant Pretty then looked towards Salty. "God damn it, Redleg. Get the hell on that phone and call in Artie on that damn tree line.
Tell the firebase we got about a company worth of VC firing at us.
Snapped out of his trance, Salty jumped down into the prone and immediately began low-crawling to where Hayden's body lay. Fire mission, troops in contact, stuttered Salty nervously into the radio hand mic. It was still attached to the radio on Hayden's back and covered in his sticky blood. One round, adjust, grid coordinates, Foxtrot Yankee, muttered Salty as he fumbled around with the map in his hands. Check fire, interrupted Captain Greenbaum, the artillery commander back at the firebase. FO, you need to recheck your sector plot. That coordinate will have us shooting into China. Salty gulped, looking at his map again. Sweat ran into his eyes and fogged up his glasses. He pulled them off as the staccato rhythm of machine gun fire increased overhead. The loud boom, boom, boom of several VC heavy machine guns drowned out the lighter of the one American M60 machine gun. And Salty could hear wounded soldiers crying out for the medic. Correction, said Salty nervously over the radio. Fire mission, 1 round adjust. Grid coordinates, Yankee Foxtrot, 769-00-344. Check fire, yelled Captain Greenbaum again. Damn it, FO. That sector coordinate will have our howitzers facing in completely the opposite direction. God damn it, yelled Sergeant Pretty to Salty. He was hunkered down behind a dirt mound along with the platoon's machine gun team while the lieutenant was desperately spotting for targets. Although Sergeant Pretty was 20 meters away from Salty, he could still see the unbridled hatred and disgust in Pretty's eyes. God damn you, Redleg. I got wounded people that need attention, but my medics can't get to them. Now either you get your head out of your ass and call that mission, or you get your ass up and walk that damn radio to me and I'll call the mission for you, you little shit. Salty lay there, stunned as RPG explosions began to mix in with the small arms fire that was raining down on the Americans. More yells rang out as more soldiers got hit. Time seemed to move slowly and his ears rang. Salty had completely forgotten all of his training. He'd completely forgotten everything he'd ever boasted about. He simply lay there, mouth open, eyes wide, and stared with disbelief as Sergeant Pretty instructed his machine gunners to point the M60 at Salty. He could barely register Sergeant Pretty yelling, "Do your damn job, FO, or I swear I'll kill you myself. You're getting my people killed." Salty closed his eyes. More than anything in the world, all Sam Salty Menendez wanted to be was an American. America was the land of freedom and opportunity. After serving his time in the army, Sam's path to American citizenship would be confirmed. Then he could bring his family over from the Philippines. His mom wanted to open a bakery, his sister wanted to become a nurse, and his little brother just wanted to go to a good school. They could all do all of that in the States. But first Sam needed to become a citizen. His family back in Manila was counting on him. But to make it in America, an Asian immigrant had to be better than everyone else. They had to be the best at what they did in order to stand out and get ahead. Sam hated the so-called anti-war protesters that he saw in the streets of America, burning and looting the cities and supporting the communists. Sam hated them because they'd absolutely no idea how privileged and lucky they were to be living in America. The words of JFK had always inspired Sam with patriotic pride, even though he wasn't yet an American. Ask not what your country can do for you, but rather ask what you can do for your country. That's what Sam wanted. To serve the great nation called America. Get rich, but take nothing away from anyone else. Once his family made it to the States, they would become rich and successful through hard work and patience and diligence. And they do it without taking a cent from the American taxpayers. But first, Sam had to survive Vietnam. Not only that, he had to prove that he was the best damn American FO in the entire Iron Triangle. However, as Sam raised the radio mic to his lips, he never stopped to realize that the VC had their own forward observers too, and one was better than him. "Come on, son," urged Captain Greenbaum as calmly as he could over the radio telephone. "Calm down, remember your training, and give me those grid coordinates." It was static on the phone, followed by silence. Captain Greenbaum looked at his radio operator, shaking his head when he realized that the line to his platoon was dead. He had no communication with his platoon and little option left except to send another platoon into the Viet Cong meat grinder in order to rescue his trapped platoon. Suddenly, the radio came to life. Cobra Dan, this is Viper Strike. Cobra Dan, this is Viper Strike. Salty Menendez's voice was loud and strong over the command radio channel. Viper Strike, this is Cobra Dan, said Captain Greenbaum. Sit rep, over. Cobra Dan, said Salty. Sit rep. Company-sized VC element dug into our south. Viper element is pinned down, danger close. Fire mission. Shell. High explosive. Fuse. Quick. Grid. Yankee Foxtrot 34451 76900. 20 rounds. Fire for effect. Viper strike. Viper strike, yelled Captain Greenbaum. Say again. Fire for effect? Are you sure that you don't need to adjust? Negative, Cobra Dan, replied Salty. The grid coordinates are accurate. No adjusting rounds needed. I say again, no adjusting rounds needed. Fire for effect. 20 rounds. Fire for effect. Captain Greenbaum's radio operator looked up at him. Doubt was etched all over Captain Greenbaum's face. The FO on the other line was calling for the complete destruction of the grid coordinate he'd given first, without making sure that the rounds would hit precisely where he wanted them to be. Plus, there was an American platoon of at least 30 soldiers within 500 meters of where the FO was calling for the high explosive rounds to fall, making them danger close. One errant round could spell disaster for the Americans. Once a high explosive round was fired, it could not be called back, and the consequences of a round falling short of the target would be devastating. Captain Greenbaum spoke again into the radio. Viper Strike, I'm going to need confirmation on that grid before I'll authorize. No time for adjusting fire, yelled Salty. The coordinates are accurate. The VC are going to start flanking us once we lose fire superiority. We need those rounds now. Captain Greenbaum looked towards his fire direction officer, who was staring at him intently. Those coordinates are in that platoon's area of operations, said the fire direction officer. Send that mission down to the gun line, Lieutenant, said Captain Greenbaum. It's my call. Fire on those grid coordinates. The fire direction officer gulped and nodded, then yelled over the gun battery radio, Fire mission, fire mission, fire mission. In less than 10 seconds, the 4 howitzers outside began belching high explosive rounds towards the exact coordinates which Salty had given. Later, back at the firebase, after Sergeant First Class Pretty had checked in on the condition of his platoon, he made his way to Captain Greenbaum's tent. 5 of his soldiers had been wounded in the fight, including his lieutenant and his grenadier, but they were alive at least. The platoon had gotten off pretty lucky, despite the fact that his 30 soldiers had been ambushed by a company of over 100 VC fighters. It could have been far worse for the Americans, except the American artillery completely shattered the VC forces. That artillery was spot on, Captain, said Sergeant Pretty. It was perfect. We're still policing up VC bodies, weapons, and equipment. That's what we're here for, Sergeant Pretty, smiled Captain Greenbaum. But, I'm curious, sir. How'd you know where to place the rounds? Said Pretty. That was by far the most amazing example of blind firing I've ever seen. Captain Greenbaum looked up at Sergeant Pretty, with a confused look on his face. Sergeant Pretty, I thought your FO called in the fire missions. This time it was Sergeant Pretty who had the stunned look on his face. No, sir. Our FO, Private First Class, I forget his name, took a direct hit from a VC mortar and the radio was destroyed. He was killed before any of our artillery impacted on the Viet Cong. Well, here we are back in Vietnam very, very quickly. We were only here last night, weren't we? Actually, this wasn't really part of the plan. You know, I like to mix things up and give you a variety of content here on the channel. And we did this last night, the whole military special ops thing, which I admittedly do love doing quite a lot. But I don't like to do the same thing 2 nights in a row. But unfortunately, stuff happened today, so here we are with the next episode in this Vietnam mystery series. But I will definitely be doing something different on Wednesday. Wendigo story? Sound good to you? Pretty long one too, maybe best part of 2 hours? Okay? Yeah, there you go. Alright, my dear friends, well, that's it for me this evening, but I'll be back again very, very soon. Till the next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or 2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.